Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Chair Yellen, for being here. And I also want to comment, I was stunned at how remarkably clear and linear your remarks have been here today. It shouldn't be a surprise, but it is quite impressive to observe it firsthand. So thank you for that. You touched on something a few minutes ago about some deeper structural trends going on in the employment market and the job market. And you tied those, I think, very appropriately to the trends of, or the macro trends of globalization and technology, which, as we all know, have benefited people with terrific educations or with access to capital or with highly refined skills, but they've been very disruptive to the average American. And in my judgment, this is the root cause of some of the concerns that we have around income inequality and job creation, particularly job creation of jobs that have a decent standard of living. We're creating high-skilled jobs and low-skilled jobs, but not a lot of middle-skilled jobs. Is it possible, and you hate to use those four words that people always regret, quote, this time is different, is it possible that these trends, as they continue to play out in our economy and in our job market, put us in a position that we have, or the Fed would have accommodating monetary policy for a sustained period of time as we work through these things, and particularly absent Congress doing things like immigration reform, greater investment in infrastructure, more targeted way to work through these challenges? Is it possible that that is a new norm and that the size of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, in fact, stays quite large for a reasonable period of time, which I don't necessarily think is a problem, which will be my second question, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
So, you know, I think these longer-term trends have to do with relative wages of different groups in the labor force, and they've been going on for a long time for the reasons that you stated. I don't think that those trends are ones that the Federal Reserve can really address. Right. The appropriate policy lie elsewhere. They may have to do with education and training. So in that sense, when the labor market has returned to normal, in the sense that most people who are looking for work are able to find work for which they are suited and skilled in a reasonable period of time, there really won't be much more that is in our domain that we can do. So we wouldn't keep our balance sheet large or refrain from raising interest rates for that reason. But there are some people who have suggested that the distribution of income and rising inequality are pulling down spending and holding down spending growth. And it's hard to get clear evidence on that. To the extent that that's true, it would be a way in which inequality would be slowing the pace of recovery back to full employment. In that sense, it would affect how long we would hold interest rates where they are.
And my second question is around, and you mentioned in your testimony, how you think about certain financial indicators, asset bubbles in particular, because we've definitely seen in the last couple of years a delinking that's gone on between leverage spreads and leverage, right, which is as leverage goes up, spreads normally widen, as leverage goes down, spreads normally tighten. We've seen that delink, just as we've seen the delinking of equity market values with corporate earnings. So this delinking, I think of it more as froth as opposed to formation of asset bubbles. How do you think about these things, or what kind of benchmarks do you use to indicate that we may, in fact, be creating asset bubbles in different markets?
So we can't detect within any certainty whether or not there's an asset bubble, but we can look at a variety of different valuation metrics akin to price-earnings ratios in the stock market, a variety of ways of measuring those. And we can look to see, have valuations in that sense moved out of historically normal ranges? And I would say for the equity market as a whole, the answer is that valuations are in historically normal ranges. Now, interest rates, long-term interest rates are low, and that is one of the factors that feeds into equity market valuations. So there is that linkage. So there are pockets where we could potentially see misvaluations in smaller cap stocks, but overall, those broad metrics don't suggest that we are in obviously bubble territory. But you know, we don't have targets for equity prices and can't detect if we're in a bubble with certainty.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Senator Coates.